You were not merely another page in the story she told herself about her life. Another fleeting character introduced for a moment of plot convenience before being written off. To think so would be to misunderstand the fundamental architecture of a human narrative. You were a chapter. And not just any chapter, but one of those pivotal, turning point sections that the entire rest of the book either consciously builds upon or, in its absence, unconsciously circles around like a ghost. You were the chapter she skipped. She flipped past your pages with a restless thumb, her eyes scanning but not truly reading, her mind already leaping ahead to what she imagined waited in the next section. She was seduced by the blank pages, by the promise of a more thrilling plot, by the allure of a story that was all climax and no careful, necessary build-up. She mistook your stillness for stagnation, your depth for difficulty, and your profound, quiet substance for something that was simply taking too long to get to the point, which she failed to grasp. In her impatient rush is the literary function of a foundational chapter. Some chapters are mere connective tissue, moving the characters from one location to another, filling space between events. But others, the rare essential ones, do not just advance the narrative. They define it. They provide the context, the backstory, the moral and emotional soil from which every subsequent action either blooms or withers. They are the chapters where a character's mettle is tested not in a dramatic battle, but in the silent, private moments of choice. They are where themes are established, where the central questions of the entire work are first posed. You were that chapter. You were not an incident. You were an initiation. You offered not just a fleeting emotion, but a path to evolution. You were the quiet, patient space where she could have learned the difference between a love that is a frantic, transactional performance and a love that is a steady, unwavering presence. You were the lesson in patience she did not want to sit through, the depth she was afraid to swim in, the mirror that showed her a reflection she was not yet brave enough to face. She left because she was addicted to the noise. The initial silence of your presence, which was the silence of peace and self-containment, felt to her like a void that needed to be filled. She mistook the chaotic, unpredictable symphony of new attention, flattering but ultimately empty validation, for a more exciting score. The dopamine rush of a new notification, a new flirtation, a new conversation. That started with the thrilling uncertainty of what if. This was a language she understood. It was the language of the surface, of the immediate, of the easily digestible. Your energy spoke a different dialect altogether. It was the language of the deep, the consistent, the earned. It was not loud, but it resonated at a frequency that could have tuned her entire being to a more stable pitch. She interpreted your calm as a lack of passion, your consistency as a lack of spontaneity, and your refusal to engage in petty dramas as a lack of investment. She was a storm looking for another storm to collide with, and you were the unshakable mountain that simply allowed the weather to pass. The storm, frustrated by the mountain's immovability, moves on. Seeking chaos, it can amplify. When she walked away from you, she truly believed she was walking toward a brighter horizon, a more compelling story. She framed your narrative as one she had outgrown, a slow-paced drama, when she craved an action thriller. But she was not walking toward light. She was walking deeper into the noise. She was trading the profound, sometimes challenging silence of a library for the relentless, flashing cacophony of a casino. At first, the casino is intoxicating. The bells, the lights, the constant possibility of a jackpot. It feels like life amplified. But no one can live in a casino. The soul becomes malnourished. The constant stimulation becomes a form of torture. The initial excitement is not sustainable. It is a sugar rush that inevitably leads to a crash. She left behind what she perceived as a quiet man, but in reality, she left behind her mirror. You were not just a partner. You were a reflection. In your eyes, she saw not who she was in that moment of impulsive insecurity, but who she had the potential to become. You reflected back her strength when she felt weak, her wisdom when she was being foolish, her inherent value when she was seeking external validation. You were the living proof of the evolved, centered, and secure woman that existed as a potentiality within her. By walking away from you, She was, in a very real sense, walking away from that best version of herself. She was rejecting the path of depth and choosing the path of distraction. This is the tragic irony of her departure. She believed she was seeking an upgrade, a more valuable prize. But she was trading a foundational, load-bearing wall for a new coat of paint. The paint is shiny and new and changes the look of everything instantly. It provides the illusion of transformation. But when the first strong wind blows, the structure groans, and she will realize, with a dawning and sickening clarity, that she removed the very thing that provided integrity to the whole. The noise she ran toward will begin to sound less like music and more like static. The new conversations will start to feel repetitive. The fresh attention will reveal its shallow roots, and the dopamine rush will become harder to trigger, leaving behind a hollow emptiness that your presence once filled so completely. She will start to understand that what she interpreted as boredom was actually the first unfamiliar feeling of peace. What she called too predictable was the safety of consistency. And what she dismissed as not enough was, in fact, a depth of character and a quality of love so rare that most people spend their entire lives hoping to even catch a glimpse of it. She had it in her hands, and she set it down, thinking something shinier was just around the corner. She skipped the chapter that would have given the rest of her story its meaning. And now, no matter how many pages she turns, the narrative will feel incomplete, unmoored, and perpetually lacking the substance that she, in her impatience, left behind. The world is full of men who drift. They are carried by the currents of popular opinion, the winds of their own fleeting emotions, and the tides of whatever validation they can find. They are reactive, their inner state a weather vane, spinning with every compliment and criticism. You were not one of them. This was your rarity. It wasn't about perfection. A flawless, polished statue is cold, distant, and ultimately a fake ideal. Your rarity was in your authenticity, in the grounded, unshakable reality of your presence. You were not a man pretending to have direction. You had it. It was an internal compass, calibrated to your own true north, and you did not drop it to chase after every passing distraction. In moments of collective panic, when others lost their heads and scrambled for easy answers, you possessed a patience that was not passive, but powerful. It was the patience of a deep-rooted tree in a storm, bending where it must, but holding its ground, knowing the tempest would eventually pass. And when faced with emotional ultimatums or manipulative silences, where other men would beg, plead, and barter away their self-respect for a crumb of attention, your own silence spoke volumes. It was not the silence of punishment or sulking, but the silence of a man who knows his own worth does not need to be loudly proclaimed. It was the quiet confidence of a king who does not have to announce he is the king. His bearing and his command of the room simply make it so. This sets you entirely apart from the game that so many others desperately, often pathetically, play. You did not play the game. You understood it. You saw the board, the pieces, the strategies, and the petty gambits for what they were, a distracting pastime for those who had not yet found a more meaningful purpose. Your focus was on building something real, while others were focused on scoring points. You understood that the chase, in its common form, was a form of self-debasement. It was an admission that you needed to capture something external to feel complete. So you did not chase. You observed. You watched the frantic energy of others, the posturing, the false promises, the desperate attempts to be seen as interesting or important. And from your place of stillness, you could discern the authentic from the performative, the substance from the shadow. This profound understanding, this refusal to participate in the frantic dance, is what made you so deeply unsettling to her. Most people are predictable. They operate on a stimulus-response mechanism. Push a button, get a reaction. Create drama, receive engagement. Withhold affection, inspire pursuit. You were an anomaly. Your buttons were not where she expected to find them. Your core could not be rattled by her storms. Your quiet self-assurance was a force she had never before encountered, and it was a force she found she could not manipulate. This was the core of the tension. Manipulation requires a lever. It needs an insecurity to prey upon, a fear to amplify, a need to exploit. She was adept at finding these levers in other men. A man who needs constant reassurance can be controlled with the threat of withdrawing it. A man with a fragile ego can be controlled with subtle criticism or comparative praise. A man who is emotionally volatile can be led by provoking a reaction. But in you, she found a fortress with no obvious gate, a structure built on a foundation of self-validated worth. Your assurance came from within. You did not need her to tell you that you were strong or capable or valuable. You knew it. This rendered her entire arsenal of emotional tactics useless. Trying to provoke you was like shouting into a vast canyon. The sound was absorbed by the immense space, and all that returned was the echo of her own voice, sounding small and lonely. Your stability highlighted her chaos. Your peace accentuated her turmoil. You were, in all likelihood, the first man who didn't bend when she tested you. This testing is not always a conscious, malicious act. Often, it is an ingrained, almost instinctual behavior born from a deep-seated insecurity. It is a way for a person to probe the walls of a relationship, to find its limits, to see how much the structure can withstand. She would push, sometimes subtly, sometimes overtly, waiting for the creak, the groan, the sign of weakness that would confirm her underlying belief that nothing and no one is truly solid. She would create minor conflicts, inject drama, or withdraw her warmth, all to see if you would wobble. If you would compromise your principles to appease her, if you would lose your center to pull her back into orbit, but you didn't. You held. You remained calm. You held your boundaries with a firm but gentle resolve, and you refused to be emotionally blackmailed. You loved her, this is crucial, but you loved her without losing yourself in the process. Your love was not a frantic, desperate offering meant to purchase her presence. It was a steady, generous emission from a source that was already full. And that is precisely, unequivocally, why she ran. It had nothing to do with you not being enough. In fact, the problem was the terrifying, magnificent opposite. You were too much. You were too real for the fantasy she wanted to live in. The fantasy was a comfortable one. It was a world where love was a dramatic, passionate roller coaster with soaring highs and crushing lows. A world where her emotions were the central weather system that everyone else had to adapt to. It was a world where she could be the unpredictable protagonist, and her partner would be the perpetually off-balance supporting character, forever trying to earn his place in her narrative. You offered a different reality. You offered a partnership of two whole individuals, a shared journey on solid ground, not a dizzying ride on a track she controlled. Your reality required accountability. It required her to look inward, to manage her own storms, to grow up. Your unwavering presence was a constant, silent challenge to her self-concept as a mercurial, complicated, free spirit. It suggested that perhaps complexity wasn't a virtue in itself, and that peace was a higher achievement than perpetual passion. So she chose the easier path. She chose the man who would bend, because his bending made her feel powerful and in control. She chose the man who would react, because his reactions were a mirror that showed her she had an impact, even if it was a negative one. She chose the man who would beg, because his begging was proof of her desirability. This path required no growth from her. It required no introspection. It simply required her to continue being exactly who she was. The men on this path were mirrors too. But they were funhouse mirrors. They distorted reality to reflect back a version of her that was all-powerful, all desirable, and perpetually the victim of circumstances. They told her what she wanted to hear, not what she needed to understand. They validated her impulses, not her potential. You, on the other hand, were a clear, clean, unforgivingly accurate pane of glass. Looking into you, she saw herself not as a fantasy, but as a work in progress. She saw her patterns, her defenses, her insecurities, and her immense, untapped strength. It was a reflection that was ultimately loving, because it believed in her capacity to be better. But it was also a profoundly uncomfortable one. And in that moment of choice, between the comforting distortion and the challenging truth, she fled from the man who held the mirror, blaming the glass for the reflection it showed. She ran not from your inadequacy, but from the terrifying and magnificent responsibility of her own growth. The architecture of her regret will not be a sudden, catastrophic collapse. It will not arrive with the dramatic fanfare of a thunderclap or the sharp, immediate sting of a fresh wound. No, its construction will be a far more insidious and psychologically intricate process. It's built brick by silent brick in the quiet, unobserved corners of her mind. It will be a slow dawning realization, a tide that encroaches so gradually she barely notices her feet are wet until she is already waist-deep in the chilling waters of what if. At first, in the immediate aftermath of her departure, there will be no room for it. She will be buoyed, lifted on a surge of what she will mistake for liberation. The world will feel light, boundless, and filled with a thrilling, almost electric potential. This is the anesthesia of novelty. New conversations will bloom on her phone, each one a small mystery, a new story to be unraveled. The attention will feel fresh, unburdened by history or expectation. It is the dopamine rush of the swipe, the match. The first data chemical high that is powerfully effective at masking the dull ache of a deeper, more significant loss. She will be the author of her own redemption arc, performing healing for an audience of friends and followers. Social media will become her stage, where she posts sun-drenched pictures of solitude and captions about self-discovery, framing your absence not as a void, but as a vacuum now filled with possibility. She will act, with convincing fervor, like a woman unbothered. Reborn from the ashes of a relationship she has decided was holding her back. But a high, by its very nature, is a temporary state. It is a peak that must, inevitably, be followed by a descent. The human nervous system cannot sustain a constant state of novelty. It seeks equilibrium, a return to a baseline. And it is in this descent, in the quiet moments, that the performance cannot reach, that the first whisper will begin. It will start not as a voice, but as a feeling, a subtle, unsettling dissonance. Like a single instrument playing slightly out of tune in an otherwise harmonious orchestra. It might happen as she lies in bed, the glow of her phone screen extinguished, and the silence of the room becomes palpable. It might surface in the middle of a laugh with a new person, a sudden fleeting sense of hollowness at the core of the amusement. This is the whisper, the first ghost of a thought. You made a mistake. It is a thought she will immediately suppress, rationalize, and bat away. She will attribute it to habit, to nostalgia, to the fear of being alone. She will tell herself it is just the residue of an old attachment, something that time will inevitably dissolve. Yet the whisper is persistent. It gains volume and substance not through dramatic events, but through 1,000 tiny comparative realizations. It grows louder as she discovers, piece by piece, that the attention she so craves is inherently shallow. The compliments from new suitors feel generic, recycled from a universal script of seduction. The conversations, once brimming with the excitement of discovery, begin to reveal their limits. They skate on the surface of personalities, never plunging into the depths of real vulnerability or shared history. The men she meets are funhouse mirrors, reflecting back a distorted, exaggerated image of her own desirability, but they lack the clarity and honesty of the true mirror she left behind. The chaos she once mistook for passion begins to reveal its true nature. It is not the creative chaos of art or revolution, but the draining chaos of inconsistency, emotional unavailability, and unresolved drama. The noise she ran toward starts to sound less like a symphony and more like statica, relentless, meaningless cacophony that provides no nourishment for the soul. It is in this emerging quiet, amid the fading echoes of the noise, that she will begin to feel the absence. This is not the mere absence of a person, which is manageable. This is the absence of a specific foundational quality, the feeling of safety you provided. This safety was not something you articulated with promises or grand gestures. It was not a performance. It was communicated through your unwavering presence. It was in the calm, steady rhythm of your breathing beside her in the night. It was in the way you listened, not just waiting for your turn to speak, truly absorbing her words, holding her emotions without judgment. It was in the unshakable certainty that you would not flinch in the face of her storms, You were a harbor, not another tempest. This feeling of profound security is a psychological anchor. Without it, she begins to feel adrift. The new men in her life may be exciting, they may be charming, they may offer temporary distraction, but they do not offer this bedrock stability. Their presence is often a demand for energy, it's not a provision of it. This is when her revisitation of your chapter begins in earnest. It is no longer a casual, curious glance back. It is a longing. She will find herself, almost against her will, scrolling through old photos. But she is not looking to reminisce about specific events. She is searching for a feeling. She will study the pictures, looking for evidence of that peace in her own eyes. In the relaxed set of her shoulders, when she was with you, she will reread old text messages, not for the content of the words, but to recall the tone, the feeling of being understood, of being seen by someone who is not trying to project an image onto her, but who is truly perceiving her. She will start to connect the dots she previously ignored. Your patience was not indifference. It was strength. Your silence was not weakness. It was a profound respect for your own peace and hers. Your consistency was not boredom. It was the very framework upon which a lasting, meaningful life could be built. And in this painful, dawning clarity, she will arrive at the most devastating realization of all, the energy you possess that grounded. Masculine, deeply peaceful energy does not come around twice. It is not a commodity that can be found on another dating profile or in another bar. It is the product of a specific alchemy of character, experience, and self-possession. It is rare. She had it. She held it in her hands, felt its weight and its warmth, and she let it go, believing it was common. She traded a one-of-a-kind masterpiece for the fleeting thrill of a lottery ticket. The regret that now begins to take root is not merely for the loss of a man, but for the loss of a path. It is the regret of having been offered a key to a more evolved, more peaceful version of her own life, having thrown it away, mistaking it for a lock. This regret is a quiet, internal hum that will now accompany her. A baseline of sorrow against which all future joys will be measured and often found wanting in the raw. Exposed aftermath of her departure, the instinct is to scream. It is a biological, primal response to lost, to fill the void with sound, with action, with any tangible proof that you still exist and that your existence matters. This is the crossroads where most men ruin their own story, where they trade the long, patient arc of true recovery for the cheap, immediate gratification of a reaction. They become architects of their own undoing, pouring their remaining energy into a desperate campaign to prove a point that should not need proving. They reach out with texts that range from the plaintive to the accusatory, each one a small piece of their dignity offered up on the altar of her attention. They become curators of a public persona, crafting social media posts designed not to document their lives, but to send her a message, photos of fun they aren't truly having, captions about moving on that scream of someone still chained to the past. They try to remind her of what she lost, not understanding that a value you have to loudly proclaim is a value that is not self-evident. This is the energy of desperation, and it is an odor that is instantly recognizable and universally repulsive. It confirms her narrative that her departure was the correct choice, that you were, in fact, the source of the instability she fled. Your frantic efforts to prove your worth become the very evidence that you lack it. But the man she will come to regret with a deep, soul-level ache is not the one who tries to prove a point. He is the one who disappears into his purpose. He understands that the most powerful response is not a louder argument, but a profound and deliberate silence. This is not the silence of a sulking child, which is a passive-aggressive demand for attention. This is the active, generative silence of a forest growing, of a mountain enduring. It is the silence of a man who has taken all the chaotic, painful energy of his heartbreak and, through an act of immense will, transmuted it into fuel. He stops orbiting her world and begins building his own. In this choice lies the ultimate paradox, the psychological masterstroke that rewrites the entire narrative. The less you care, the more she will. Your silence, when chosen from a place of strength and not pain, becomes your most powerful weapon because it is not a weapon at all. It is a shield, and then it becomes a magnet. While she scrolls through the curated, meaningless noise of her digital world, the fleeting victories, the shallow connections, the performative happiness of others, your absence becomes a palpable force. It is the one blank space on the map of her consciousness, the unanswered question that hangs in the air of her life. The human mind, particularly one prone to overanalysis and drama, abhors a vacuum. It will rush to fill it. And in the absence of any data, any updates, any crumbs of information from you, her imagination is forced to do the work. This is where you win. You are no longer a man constrained by the reality of your human flaws and daily struggles. You become a phantom, a concept, a story, she tells herself. She starts to wonder with a gnawing anxiety what you are doing. Is he working out? Is he building his business? Is he reading, learning, evolving? The mundane reality of you washing dishes or paying bills is irrelevant. In her mind, you are on a heroic journey of self-improvement. She wonders who you are becoming. Has he become more confident? More successful? More at peace? The version of you she knew begins to morph in her memory, overshadowed by the terrifying potential of the man you might now be. And the most haunting question of all, does he even think about her anymore? The possibility that you have achieved a state of peace so complete that she no longer occupies your thoughts is an unbearable blow to the ego. That once thrived on your attention, this mystery, this not knowing, eats away at her composure like acid. The longer you maintain this disciplined silence, the louder her regret becomes, because it forces a brutal comparison. She is out there, actively chasing the momentary excitement she thought she wanted, swimming in the shallow end of the emotional pool. And with every passing day of your silence, she is presented with the growing evidence, or rather, the terrifying possibility that you are not chasing at all. You are not in the pool. You have built an ocean. While she is collecting likes and fleeting validation, you are quietly becoming everything she was too blind to appreciate when it was offered to her freely. Your value is no longer something you assert. It is something she is forced to deduce, and the conclusion she arrives at is far more powerful than anything you could have told her. If you want her to regret skipping your chapter, you do not chase her. You evolve past her. This is not an act of petty revenge. It is an act of profound self-preservation and growth. You build a life so full, so grounded, so intensely focused on a future that excites you, that she simply no longer fits in it. The space she once occupied has been filled with purpose. The energy you once spent analyzing her behavior is now invested in building your body, your mind, your career, your peace. You let your success speak in boardrooms you've conquered. You let your discipline show in the calm focus in your eyes and the strength in your posture. You let your peace radiate from you in social situations, a quiet confidence that needs no external validation. This triad, success, discipline, peace, becomes the news story she can't stop reading from afar. She is no longer the protagonist of your narrative. She has been demoted to a spectator. She is watching a blockbuster unfold without her. This is because women, on a fundamental, often subconscious level, are drawn to men who create gravity. This is not about physical mass, but about energetic density. It is the quality of a man who is so centered in his own mission, so secure in his own value, that his very presence creates a pull. He does not need to seek. He attracts. Men whose energy pulls women back even when logic, pride, or circumstance says they shouldn't care. Every late night thought she has, where she lies awake, comparing the shallow conversations of her new reality to the deep understanding of her old one. That is your gravity. Every time she's on a date with a man who laughs too loudly, tries too hard, or reveals a fragile ego, and her mind involuntarily drifts back to your calm composure, that is your gravity. Every quiet moment of loneliness that pierces through the noise of her distractions, that is your gravity. And this gravitational pull only intensifies. It only gets stronger when you cease entirely from orbiting her world. The moment you stop tracking her social media, asking mutual friends about her, or crafting your life as a response to her absence, is the moment your own world gains critical mass. You become a sun, and she, whether she admits it or not, feels the inexorable pull of a planet that is broken free from its orbit, now shining with its own fierce, independent light. Your silence is not empty. It is full of your becoming, and that is a sound far louder than any words you could ever speak. In the final analysis, this entire painful symphony was never truly about her regret. To see it that way is to remain on some level still chained to her perception, still gauging your recovery by the thermometer of her remorse. Her regret is a byproduct, a shadow cast by the substantial object of your own transformation. It is not the goal. It is the echo. The core truth, the one that will set you permanently free, is that her exit was not a rejection of your worth, but a divine redirection of your path. It was the universe, in its harsh but perfect wisdom, forcibly removing a person whose presence was incompatible with the man you were destined to become. The pain you endured was not a punishment, but a refiner's fire. It burned away the illusions you held about love, that it meant sacrifice without boundaries, that loyalty could cure chaos, that your unwavering effort could somehow awaken appreciation in a heart addicted to the thrill of the new. It incinerated the naive hope that potential was the same as reality, and it left you standing amidst the ashes, stripped raw, with no choice but to meet the man you were at your core. This meeting with yourself was the true beginning. In the profound silence she left behind, a silence that initially screamed with absence, you were forced to listen to a voice you had long drowned out with the noise of a relationship, your own. You learned through brutal necessity that love without self-respect is not love at all. It is a form of spiritual dependency, slow and insidious self-abandonment, where you mortgage your peace for the fleeting hope of theirs. You learn that emotional control is the highest form of power, not because it means suppressing your feelings, but because it means you are no longer a slave to them. You learn to feel the full, it's a devastating force of heartbreak without allowing it to shatter your character or derail your mission. You learn to hold your pain like a sacred object, to study it, to learn from it, and ultimately, to alchemize it into fuel. This is the initiation into a version of manhood that few willingly choose, but that forges the strongest of souls. You have now become a man who validates himself through purpose, not a woman's attention. You no longer look outward for a reflection of your value. You generate it from within. This fundamental shift in your internal source code changes everything about how you move through the world. You no longer operate from a place of desperation, trying to fill a void with external affirmation. You operate from a place of direction, your energy focused like a laser on a future that you are actively building. This shift is palpable. People sense it. They respect you more because you no longer seek their respect. You command it by the simple, unshakable fact of your self-possession. Women approach you differently. They are no longer the prize you are desperate to win. They are potential companions you assess for compatibility with your peaceful, purpose-driven life. The energy you emit is no longer one of need, but one of discernment. Life itself begins to open doors that were once kept shut by the chaos of your own unresolved needs. The profound beauty of this evolution is that it does not demand recognition. You don't need to post about your gym progress, your promotion, or your serene state of mind. You don't need to talk about your healing journey. You simply embody it. Your silence has become your loudest statement. It is the silence of a finished process, of a lesson fully integrated. When she, in her restless scrolling, checks your profile and finds no trace of the man who once sought her attention, no reaction, no subtle dig, no performance of a happy life, she feels that loss more deeply than any angry message could ever make her feel. She isn't missing the attention. She is missing the emotional gravity you carried. She is missing the safety, the stillness, the profound sense of being anchored that your presence provided. And now that this energy is gone from her life, she feels its absence like a fundamental law of her universe has been repealed. You are no longer her comfort. You have become her consequence. The version of you that once begged for love has been replaced by a version that commands it without uttering a single word. And when she finally, inevitably, understands this, she will try to find her way back. It is a near universal law, but it is crucial to see this return for what it is. It is not a return born of a sudden, enlightened love. It is a return born of memory and of life's humbling lessons. It is the realization that the peace she once took for granted was not a common commodity, but a rare and precious atmosphere. She will remember the way you listened not to rebut, but to understand. She will remember your calm in the face of her storms, your strength when she tested you, your respectful distance when she pushed too far. These memories will sting now because they represent a caliber of character she cannot easily find. When she tries to return, she will be seeking the man she remembers, the one who cared, who worried, who waited. But that man is gone. He died in the silence she imposed, and what rose from that ashes is someone more refined, more aware, more deliberate. You have learned the most valuable lesson she never could, that real, internal peace feels infinitely better than any temporary, external affection. So when that text or call someday appears, do not see it as validation. See it as confirmation. Confirmation that you healed correctly. Confirmation that your silence spoke louder than any argument ever could. It confirms that women are drawn back to the energy they could not control. Not always because they want the man, but because they want the power they once held over him. And when she reaches out and finds no reaction, no emotional hook, no need for explanation, that is the moment she will know, in her bones, that her chapter is irrevocably over. You have closed it, not with the slam of a door fueled by bitterness, but with the quiet, final click of a lock turned by awareness. You understand now, with a clarity that borders on the spiritual, that some people enter your life not to stay, but to show you what you must stop accepting. Her leaving taught you more than her presence ever could. It taught you patience, detachment, and ruthless discernment. It taught you that love without respect is a slow death of the soul, and that walking away from it is not an act of weakness, but the ultimate expression of wisdom. As you continue forward, unburdened, something magical begins to happen. You stop seeking love and start attracting it. But it is a different kind of love now. It is not the draining, chaotic, confusing love of the past. It is a love that feels peaceful, reciprocal, and grounded. This is because you have fundamentally changed the energy you emit. You no longer vibrate at the frequency of desperation or longing. You vibrate at the frequency of presence. You walk into a room and people feel your calm before you even speak. You have become a man of stillness, of focus, of a quiet intensity that does not need to announce itself. This is the energy that moves mountains. This is the energy that women can sense, but cannot manipulate. And it is this same energy that will one day attract a woman who doesn't play games because she doesn't need to. She will be healed, centered, and whole in her own right. She won't see your peace as a challenge or your strength as a threat. She will not compete with your peace. She will protect it. And when that day comes, you will understand with absolute certainty that losing the wrong woman was the necessary price to meet the right one. Meanwhile, she will continue her search, forever haunted by the ghost of the feeling you provided. But every attempt to replicate it will fail, because you were not just a man. You were a state of being, a quality of energy she is no longer aligned with. Her regret will not fade. It will become a lifelong companion, a subtle filter through which she views every subsequent relationship. You will have become her emotional benchmark, the standard she cannot forget and no one else can meet. This is not your victory, but her consequence. It is the curse of losing a man who loved without attachment and led without fear. So, as you look back, do not wish for a different past. Every moment of heartbreak was a chisel strike, carving you into the man you are now, a man who knows his value, honors his boundaries, and is unwavering in his mission. You have outgrown the man who thought love meant sacrifice. You now know that true love is the act of being yourself so fully and powerfully that the right people are inspired to rise and meet you there. You don't chase anymore. You understand, in the deepest part of your soul, that what is meant for you will not only find you, but will have to walk the final distance on its own, meeting you in the radiant, unshakable peace you have built for yourself. And in that truth, you are finally and forever free.